to another Guts and Glory, the American Revolution video, and so Chapter 3, Bunker Hill. England learns what it's dealing with. Charlestown, Massachusetts, June 17th, 1775. Powder is scarce and must not be wasted. Do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Colonel William Prescott, Massachusetts militia. So what had been a couple of grumpy, loud mouths complaining about taxes is now a full-blown shooting rebellion against the British Empire. The British Army was barricaded inside Boston, with nearly 15,000 angry Massachusetts colonists surrounding the city, and more disgruntled Americans were arriving daily to show their discontent at gunpoint. The British weren't trapped by any means. Boston Harbor was filled with Royal Navy warships that could sail in and out of the city at will. But all that changed in April 1775 when a group of rebel militiamen known as the Green Mountain Boys, honestly that sounds more like a terrible band name than a military company, captured Fort Ticonderoga at the northern tip of New York. Ticonderoga was in a particularly exciting place, and there wasn't a huge British garrison there, but it did have something that put a little fear into the hearts of the British Army in Boston. Cannons. Big ones. A lot of them. It was going to take quite a bit of time to drag all those cannons all the way across Massachusetts, but the British Army still had to act quickly. Governor Thomas Gage knew that if there were only two good places the Americans could put cannons if they wanted to shell Boston, the Dorchester Heights to the south and the Charlestown Peninsula to the north. If American cannons were set up at either position, it would be big trouble for the British dudes living in Boston. We'll never know how the American spies figured out that Governor Gage was planning to capture Charlestown. It's one of those stories that are probably super exciting, super interesting James Bond, Assassin's Creed kind of stuff. Then it went down on the super secret. All we know for sure is that some brave patriot came running out to the American lines in the night of June 15, 1775, and told the rebel leadership that the British were planning to seize Charlestown. The Americans had to act fast, so in the middle of the night, they tapped two of their most experienced commanders and a few hard-working Minutemen to grab that position first. Colonel William Prescott of the Massachusetts militia was a hardened veteran who had fought bravely in the French and Indian War. Prescott was probably a little bitter, and he missed the opportunity to take pot shots at the Redcoats during the Concord battles. So as soon as he heard there might be the chance for a fight, he put together a group of 1,000 strong men, told them to grab their shovels, picks, and rifles, and hauled out. Now, there are two big hills on the Charlestown Peninsula. The bigger one is called Bunker Hill, and that's the one Prescott was supposed to secure. The smaller one is called Breed's Hill, and that's the one Prescott actually built a fort on. We don't know whether he was just brave or bad at geography or what, but it's caused a lot of problems for people who study history over the years, because the famous Battle of Bunker Hill was actually fought on Breed's Hill, which was very confusing. You can't open a history book without reading this fact, and historians love silly little details like that and anything else that makes us feel like we're smarter than anyone else. Anyway, in the dead of night on June 16, 1775, William Prescott and 1,000 gunslinging farmers climbed up Breed's Hill on the Charlestown Peninsula and built an awesome fort. They worked all night long planting wooden stakes, digging holes that they could use for cover, and building a wooden fence that they could hide behind while they shot at the British. You can be pretty sure that when the sun came up on June 17th, the British were a little surprised. The first Brits to see the fort were the crew of HMS Lively, a warship sitting in the river that separated Charlestown from Boston. The crew of the Lively were so mad they immediately started shooting their cannons at the fort. It wasn't long before the other gunships in the harbor started firing as well. Most of the shots missed, but 2 cannonballs found their mark. One blew up the barrel where Prescott's men stored their fresh water, and the other actually knocked an American guy's head off. You can probably imagine what it might have been like to be sitting at the top of the hill that morning. These guys were woken up in the middle of the night, walked a mile or 2 up a hill, and spent 12 hours digging a bunch of holes in the ground, and now they were hungry and exhausted and had no clean water to drink. Even worse, 6 British warships were using them for target practice, and some dude's head had just been popped off, which is pretty scary if you ask me. One guy who didn't seem to have a problem with any of this was Colonel William Prescott. As bullets and cannonballs whizzed past his head, Prescott calmly walked up and down the American fortifications like he was strolling through the mall on a Saturday morning. When he saw an American militiaman who looked freaked out, Prescott would stop, tell him a joke, and then talk to the next guy until he chilled out a little. "Don't worry, bud. We got this." Back in Boston, the British Army assembled and made plans to crush these good-for-nothing rebels with a show of force that would make the Death Star look like a Nerf basketball. Governor Gage appointed Major General William Howe to lead the attack. Howe had been in the British Army for 29 years, serving on battlefields from Belgium to Quebec, and this guy had absolutely no respect for these disorganized American farmers. One of his junior officers, General Johnny Burgoyne, we'll meet him later when we talk about Saratoga, once wrote, "The government authority depends in a great measure upon the idea that trained troops are invincible against any numbers or any position of untrained rabble," and Howe believed that there was no band of yokels in existence who stood a chance against the greatest professional army on the planet. Howe loaded 2,200 redcoats in the rowboats, sailed across the Charles River, and unloaded his troops at the bottom of Breed's Hill. Then he ordered the guys to sit down and eat lunch. This made the Americans atop Breed's Hill even more bummed out that they didn't have anything to eat, but it also brought the colonists time to bring up some reinforcements. Militias from Connecticut and Rhode Island and Rhode Island. Militias from Connecticut and New Hampshire took up positions to protect the flank side of Prescott's line and keep the British from swinging around the back. At 3 p.m. on June 17, 1775, the invincible British Army lined up in battle formation, shoulder to shoulder, and prepared to crush the rebellion with one decisive strike. The soldiers attached bayonets to the ends of their rifles, and the sun glinted off their weaponry as they assembled for war. They were dressed in bright red coats with big black bearskin hats, white pants, and black boots that marched in unison to the beat of their war drums. Large banners and British flags flapped in the wind as they began a steady, unstoppable march up the hill. At the top of Breed's Hill, William Prescott's men were starting to get a little nervous. Remember, these guys were poorly trained farmers, and most of them had never even been in battle before. They didn't have uniforms. They didn't have bayonets. They were using old rifles they'd brought from home. They hadn't slept in over a day. These Minutemen weren't expecting to have to fight a battle, and a lot of these guys hadn't even brought enough powder to shoot their guns more than 5 or 6 times. Now they were being asked to defend a hill against the army of the largest empire in human history. Once again, William Prescott made his way up and down the American lines. His voice was calm but dead serious. He told his men, "Be brave, be strong, and don't shoot until you're absolutely certain you can hit an enemy. Aim for the officers first, and aim low so you don't take out their aim low so that you can take out their legs. The quote that became famous from this battle is, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Although a lot of argumentative historians like to complain that this is just an awesome story, and Prescott didn't really say it. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The point is that he told his men to wait until the enemy was 50 yards away. And don't miss. Now, the British plan of charging up hill into a group of fortified enemy infantry is pretty much a terrible idea. But that was kind of the point. William Howe had no respect for the American fighters, and he was absolutely convinced that the colonists were going to pee their pants and run away as soon as the British army got close enough to fight. Unfortunately for him, it didn't go down that way. When the redcoats were within 50 yards of the American lines, a huge ripple of white gun smoke puffed out from the Patriots' rifles. Less than a second later, the zip of musket balls cracked and ripped straight through the British lines, slamming into men and sending dozens of soldiers spinning to the ground. The entire front rank of the redcoats was shattered with one blast of gunfire. And the British were so unprepared for this that they immediately pulled back in disarray, retreating down the hill as the American forces cheered. At the base of the hill, the British reformed, attacked again, and met the same fate. A murderous hail of close-range gunfire that claimed the lives of hundreds of soldiers. Now the British were mad. They rolled up cannons. They called in reinforcements, rowing 400 Royal Marines across the river to join the attack. British gunboats started burning hot cannonballs into the town of Charleston, setting the city on fire to root out the American snipers hiding in the buildings. At the bottom of the hill, the redcoats once again fixed bayonets, resolving to capture this hill or die trying. The third attack on Breed's Hill took place late in the afternoon. It was personally led by Lieutenant Colonel Sir Robert Pigott, an ultra-brave warrior who was also a sitting member of Parliament, meaning that this was basically the British equivalent of a current U.S. senator leading a bayonet charge. Pigott ordered his men forward, again with the drums and fags in lockstep precision, and this time the British were ready for what awaited them. As Pigott charged up the hill, bayonets and rifles at the ready, another group under William Howe went up from the hill from a different direction, trying to swing around behind the rebels. Once again, Prescott ordered his men to hold their fire. It was a hot day, these men were exhausted, and their ammunition was almost gone. They were going to get one shot, and they'd be fighting for their lives in hand-to-hand combat. When the British attack was basically right on top of the Americans, Prescott gave the order to fire. Yet again, a shock wave of musket fire blasted through the British lines. But this time, the redcoats didn't break. They kept their formation, broke into a run, lowered their bayonets, and jumped over the earthworks, spear first into the American forces. One Royal Mariner later wrote, "Nothing could be more shocking than the carnage that followed the storming of this work, and a huge swirling fight that more closely resembled a battle scene from The Lord of the Rings than anything you'd expect from the American Revolution. The British and American soldiers pounded, stabbed, bit, kicked, punched, and fought with everything they had. Guys were climbing over dead and wounded men, leaping over trenches, shooting with pistols, and swinging their rifles like baseball bats. Prescott's men, outnumbered and without the advantage of bayonets, were getting the worst of it, and Prescott soon ordered them to retreat. As his men fell back, they saw Prescott, standing atop the hill with a sword drawn, personally fighting off a group of 3 rifle-swinging Brits. The British captured Breed's Hill and drove the Americans off the Charlestown Heights, but at a staggering cost. Of the 2,200 they managed to send up the hill, half of them were dead or wounded. 100 officers were dead. When word reached England, everyone was shocked and horrified by the losses the British army had received. The king himself was furious. He issued a proclamation of rebellion, ordering all people loyal to the king to bring justice to the authors, perpetrators, and abettors of such traitorous designs. As for the Americans, even though they'd lost the hill, they were bolstered by the idea that this was a fight they actually had a chance of winning. A patriot leader, Nathanael Greene, so eloquently put it, "I wish we could sell them another hill at the same price." Proclamation of Rebellion. King George III, August 23rd, 1775. Whereas many of our subjects in divers parts of our colonies and plantations in North America, misled by dangerous and ill-designing men, and forgetting the allegiance which they owe to the power that has protected and sustained them, after various disorderly acts committed in disturbance of the public peace, to the obstruction of lawful commerce, led to the oppression to our loyal subjects, carrying on the same, have at length proceeded to an open and avowed rebellion, arraying themselves in hostile manner to withstand the execution of the law, and traitorously preparing, ordering, and levying war against us. And whereas there is reason to apprehend that such rebellion hath been much promoted and encouraged by the traitorous correspondence, counsels, and comfort of divers wicked and desperate persons within this realm, to the end, therefore, that none of our subjects may neglect or violate their duty through ignorance thereof. So though any doubt of the protection which the law will afford to their loyalty and zeal, we have thought fit by and with the advice of our privy council to issue this our royal proclamation, hereby declaring that not only all our officers, civil and military, are obliged to exert their utmost endeavors to suppress such rebellion and to bring the traitors to justice, and that all our subjects of this realm and their dominions thereunto belonging are bound by law to be aiding and assisting in the suppression of such rebellion, and to disclose and make known all traitors, conspiracies, and attempts against us, our crown and dignity. And we do accordingly strictly charge and command all our officers, as well as civil and military, and all our other obedient and loyal subjects, to use their utmost endeavors to withstand and suppress such rebellion, and to disclose and make known all treasons and traitors' conspiracies, which they shall know to be against us, our crown and dignity. And for that purpose they transmit to one of our principal secretaries of state, or other proper officer, due and full information of all persons who shall be found carrying a correspondence with, or any manner or degree aiding or abetting the persons now in open arms and rebellion against our government within any other colonies and plantations in North America, in order to bring in condign punishment the authors, perpetrators, and abettors of such traitors' designs. Given at our court at St. James, the 23rd day of August, 1775, in the 15th year of our reign. God save the king! At least they build it on the right hill. Nowadays, there's a 221-foot-tall stone obelisk atop Breed's Hill commemorating the Battle of Bunker Hill. The Marquis de Lafayette laid the cornerstone in 1825, but the project ran out of money after they built only half the tower. So in 1843, a magazine editor named Sarah Josepha Hale, the woman credited with writing the song Mary Had a Little Lamb, had a week-long bake sale, and the women of Boston were able to raise enough money to complete the project. To this day, members of the Boston Fire Department train by climbing the 294 steps to the top of the monument while wearing 60 pounds of firefighting gear, which sounds like quite a workout. But at least these guys don't have anybody shooting at them like the British did when they tried to huff 60 pounds of gear up Breed's Hill. Can't it wait until morning? Remember when I talked about the Green Mountain Boys capturing Fort Ticonderoga? Well, The battle itself wasn't quite as exciting as you might think. All that really happened was that the British commander heard screaming and guys banging swords together, and he was so surprised and freaked out that he ran outside in his pajamas and surrendered immediately. Know your founding fathers. Name, William Prescott. Birthday, February 20th, 1726. Birthplace, Groton, Massachusetts. Claim to fame, commander of American troops at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Job before the war, Provincial British Army militia commander. Role in the war, colonel in the Massachusetts militia. After the war, commanded troops that suppressed Shays' Rebellion in 1786 and served in the Massachusetts General Court. Bonus fact, his grandson, William Hickling Prescott, is a famous historian who wrote a number of books about the early history of Spain in North America. He also married the granddaughter of John Lindsay, the captain of HMS Falcon, one of the British warships that fired on the American troops at Bunker Hill.